Effective altruism is like the 2.0 version of rationalism, right? So rationalism was a school of thought that I thought had some promise to it. I never loved it because there's a way in which it, I think, it believes it's got a method for being fully rational, and it doesn't understand that yes, in theory, ultimately that's the way it should be, but how you get from quadrant A where you're rational to quadrant B where you're rational when the intervening space is something you don't really understand, you may want to relax the bounds of rationality a little bit because you may ultimately be more rational in the end if you do that, right?
Yeah, it assumes too much stasis in both initial conditions and what can evolve in the interim.
Yeah. That said, it did some things really right? It focused on a Bayesian understanding of complex systems, which is laudable. It is the source, ultimately, of steel manning, which is a great technique that many of us have adopted. So anyway, rationalism, there's good and bad, but it was largely good. But at the point that it morphs into effective altruism, wow, is there a bunch to say about what's wrong with that idea. Now, there's one thing right with it, I will argue, which is that what we as evolutionists know is that pure altruism does not function. It is a self-unstable strategy, right? And that is because something that behaves truly altruistically is in a wonderful position to be taken advantage of by something that is not altruistic. So the free riders drive the altruists to extinction. And to the extent that the effective altruists have a point, their point is, well, maybe we can architect around that, right? Maybe there's a way of architecting around it. However, what it effectively becomes is a nightmare of a kind that history periodically sees, right? So first, it is worth thinking a little bit about utilitarianism. Utilitarianism being the philosophy that says we should pursue that which produces the greatest good for the greatest number, which sounds extremely laudable until you start pressure testing it and you realize that there are certain things that it puts you in danger of, right? For example, slavery. What if you have a case in which enslaving people does a large amount of harm to a small number of people, but the net good is positive for the society that does the enslaving? Well, utilitarianism would defend it, but that's obviously immoral. So the point is, you don't want to embrace utilitarianism at the level of algorithm because it will drive you into some places that we should never go. Effective altruism is even one step more dangerous, right? Because there's a recursion question, right? There's a question of over what scale are you trying to do good? And because ultimately the biggest scale and the most long-standing scale are the places where the maximum amount of good can be done, effectively it becomes an excuse for anything at a lower scale. And the correct parallel, I believe, is it's like indulgences on steroids. Right? Indulgences having been the what would it be? The program of the Catholic Church that allowed wealthy people to effectively buy the right to commit a sin for money because the amount of good that the church could do with the money was supposed to exceed the harm done by the sin, right? Now, that thing resulted in the splitting up of Catholicism and the birth of Protestantism because it was such a scourge. The idea that wealthy people should be able to buy their, the good graces of God through this mechanism is obviously an absurdity and a corruption of the church. And the point is, effective altruism has this same flavor, right? And that flavor, it is not really clear.
I don't see the connection yet. What's the flavor?
Let's look at Sam Bankman-Fried.
Let's.
Okay. Sam Bankman-Fried was a fraud who took money from people and did not treat it with the proper care that he should have, either in investors or the money of people who use the exchange.
Sure.
But he created an entity that was very powerful. That is arguably defensible if, what in the end, the wealth evaporated. So that's not defensible, but that could just
because
be
the claim was that the entity was going to do larger good in the world than any individuals were going to be able to do.
Right. And this is one of these cases where
Okay.
the loophole is as big as you need it to be.
Sure.
Any evil at all can be ostensibly justified on the basis that it is necessary to fuel some larger good that will be done later at larger scale, right? And so the basic point is, you want complete freedom from morality? Well, you can get there through effective altruism because it's in no way bounded, right? So it therefore removes every constraint.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Pay no attention to my actions. My intentions are good, and I'm gaining power so that I can push all those intentions in the right direction.
Yep, they'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today. And this also raises the question about what they will do as the bankruptcy of that mode is literally and figuratively revealed. In other words, to what extent is effective altruism having a moment of reflection about what's wrong with what it believes, and to what extent is it behind the scenes conspiring to keep itself going because it doesn't actually think that anything here has been demonstrated other than some bad business calls that caused its good thing to blow up. Mm-hmm. So in any case, there are a lot of messages in this whole picture here. One of them has to do with do-gooders, right? Mm-hmm. Effective altruism is like a kind of wokeness for, what would I even call them? A wokeness for people who aspire to being intellectuals. And it has all sorts of outgrowths. It's willing to partner apparently with those who would sabotage a good drug in the middle of a pandemic.